Mohair-based leech patterns are personal favorites as well as being amongst my most consistent performers. Mohair breathes and moves in the water, helping to suggest the ribbon-like swimming motion of a natural leech. Once a trout takes the fly, the mohair fibers wrap in and around the trout's teeth, allowing a fraction of a second longer to set the hook. Here are the materials you will need to tie one of my favorite mohair-based leech patterns, the Mohair Blood Leech. So I'm now going to show you my Mohair Blood Leech. Again, more of a traditional pattern. I believe I featured this pattern in my first book, Fly Patterns for Stillwaters, and it's still a great producer today. Into the jaws of the vise, I've placed a Daiichi streamer hook, this case 2220 number 8. It's probably the size I tie it most often in. I like to weight the front portion of the shank, so what I'm going to do is put a little bit of a layer of super glue on there and use some, you could use round lead wire, but I like using this flat lead wire I get from Fly Tying Specialties. And we're just going to lay that on. We put it on the front portion simply so the fly will have weight in the front and will help induce a little bit of a pitch and undulating motion. So we just get it started, and then that super glue will hold everything in. So we'll go one layer, and you can fold those ends down and sort of tuck them in. And if you want to add a little bit more horsepower, you can come up, just sort of hold that on and get a second layer going as well if you want. And the flat lead I like because it just gives me some control over body profile as well. You can certainly use the round lead wire, it's not going to affect it anymore. So we've got a little bit of weight there, a little bit of horsepower. And then we're going to attach our tying thread. I'm using an 8/0 Montana Fly Dark Olive. You could also use an olive, black, or maroon. It doesn't really matter. When you see the finished fly, the only part of the thread that's visible is the head area. So we're just going to break off the excess and build up a little bit of a thread ramp just to ease the transition when we push the dub body and build up the head area and hackle at the front of this fly. And then we're just going to carry that tying thread down all the way to the rear of the shank just before it tails off into the bend. So about halfway between the crushed down barb and the point of the hook is usually a good basis point for that. Now the original fly for its body used mohair yarn. And this is the color. It has no thread core. Of course, it's next to impossible to find this anymore, so I won't send you on a wild goose chase. Another excellent color, or material to use rather, is Arizona Semi-Seal, and particularly this color, which is a homemade color that is a 50-50 blend of the black red and the red. And you can see it's a very similar color to this mohair here, and it's got a little bit of added flash. So that's what we're going to tie with because it's just readily available to find. So the first thing I'm going to do is take just a clump, and I've just taken a pinch out of it, and I'm going to stack the dubbing and form a little dubbed tail. So I'm just going to pluck out one end and sort of lay it on top, and this kind of roughly evens the edges. It's not going to be like stacked deer hair or anything, but it just helps gather. And we're just going to lay that on top of the shank, a couple of wraps over top to get that in place. I'm going to go forward a little bit more, and then I'm going to take the ends that are sticking out forward of the tie-in point and simply fold them back over and lock them in place to form a little dubbed tail. If you do this with the mohair yarn, I usually just tie the yarn in and brush it out and stroke the fibers back, and it helps form a tail. But if you're going to use a dubbed tail, dubbing rather, you're going to have to put a little dub tail in as well. And you can come in and sort of just slide your scissors jaws along. You want a ragged looking tail. So now we're going to dub a body. So I'm just going to take my tying thread forward of the hook eye. I'm going to pull down about 3 to 5 inches. I'm going to take a spring-loaded dubbing tool. I'm just going to lay just so it's on camera here, I lay the tool in so the thread runs through the hooks on the spring. about 4 or 5 inches, and bring that right up. You can't see it off the camera, but the dubbing tool is just hanging below. And then I'm just going to start winding the thread rearwards, and I actually take the thread loop and move it to the top of the shank, and as I wind back to the base of the tail, that's going to close the loop up. And then we'll just move the tying thread forward to about the 3/4 mark. Because the front of the fly is a little busy. We have a hackle, a head, and some another feature to add as well. So I'm just going to take a little pinch of dubbing, and by little I mean a sparse pinch. You can see through this dubbing. See how you can clearly see the fly through it. You don't need a lot of dubbing. So I'm going to open the dubbing loop down near the dubbing tool, insert the dubbing, and you can just see it come onto camera. I'm just going to push that up, and I'm trying to get roughly equal amounts of dubbing on each side. And I'm just going to continue to add another similar volume of material. Open that loop at the bottom, and the weight of the dubbing tool keeps the tension on the tying thread and holds the material in place. I don't want to use dubbing wax. I find that mats some of these fibers, and in the water I want this fly to have total freedom of movement, to flow and undulate, so it really suggests that ribbon-like swimming motion of a natural leech. And it should be proportional, meaning that the dubbing should be roughly the same amount of dubbing with each application, so there's not sort of peaks and valleys, bare spots and heavy spots. And again, you can see right through that dubbing. So you're going to load that loop from top to bottom, right down to the tool, and then you're just going to start spinning slowly, and that's going to twist and capture the dubbing, and then you can pick up the tempo and you want to have a nice even clump, so you can pull out some of the fibers by hand. And then I also take my dubbing brush, and I'm just going to be careful not to obviously too aggressive that you actually break the thread, which can happen, but I'm just going back and forth all the way down the dubbing noodle to pick out those fibers, because when you twist it up, a lot of times those fibers get twisted around the thread, and we want them to not be wrapped around the thread, so they're free to breathe and move. We're going to give it another brushing later, but you can see this really thins out the dubbing noodle and frees a lot of those trapped fibers. So you just go up and down a couple of times, and Velcro, you don't want to have too strong a brush because you do run the risk of breaking your tying thread. And once we're happy with that, we're just going to start winding. Go back a little bit. Place the first wrap if you can, first full wrap with dubbing on it right at the base of the tail. And we're just going to slide that dubbing noodle forward one wrap at a time, and you can see my left hand, so I'm a right-handed tyer, is sweeping those fibers back out of the way, and we're going to just simply walk this dubbing noodle right up to the hanging thread. So with dubbing loops, you want to try and keep them as sparse as you can. They'll just breathe better for you, and you want to keep them make them not too long. It's better to make, if it's a really long-bodied fly or a fly that requires a lot of dubbing, to do 2 smaller dubbing loops as opposed to one long, ungainly loop that's difficult to manage. You'll be banging your knuckles off the table and everything else, and you're just not as controlled with your wraps. You're just not going to be able to accurately place it where you want. So we're just going to come right up. One more wrap. I want to leave about 1/4 of that shank exposed, and we're just going to come in and then tie some wraps directly in front, lock it off. So I put a couple wraps on top here, a couple in front to lock it off, and then we just trim away the excess, brush that back, and then we can just take at this point and aggressively, on all 4 sides of the fly, and give this a real aggressive brush. And because we've brushed it prior to wrapping and now, it'll be a lot better. And you could, if you were production tying at this point, whip finish and give this fly a bath in hot water that you've either used a kettle for or a microwave to warm up to at or just below boiling temperature, and just dunk this fly into the water, and that'll take a lot of the memory out of the fibers. Okay, we're not going to do it in this instance, but if you watch the ruby-eyed leech, for example, on this channel, you can see how what I'm talking about, because I demonstrate that right on that particular. And you can see you got a nice full body here ready to go. That's probably a pretty good leech pattern unto itself. We're going to add a few things to it. First thing was going to put a little hackle to complement it and give it an extra bit of motion. And this is pheasant rump. And I'm not sure if the camera picks it up, but this is a natural pheasant rump fiber. I'm looking for fiber length that extends no further back than the tip of our dub tail. In fact, I prefer it a little shorter. And also, if you can, it's got that natural maroon reflectiveness to it that complements the fly. You could also use dyed maroon, but my preference is to search through the pile of loose pheasant rump, or if you can get it on a cape section or a saddle section, and pick out the individual fibers you want. So we're going to prepare this for tie-in. I'm just going to remove this fluff by gently, and this feather's pretty light. Oh, it worked out well. So I've got that prepared, and I'm just going to tie that in wet fly style. So I've got that prominent maroon coloration facing me, the convex side, so when we wind this feather directly in front of the body, it's going to flow backwards over the body. We'll just come in and trim off that stem. Take our tying thread back up, and we're going to place a couple of wraps directly in front of this dub body. So we're just going to grab the feather, pull it down, make sure it's positioned properly. That's when I like to attach my hackle pliers to the tip. Make one wrap. And you can see I'm just kind of stroking the fibers to break them apart because they want to stick together, because it's a soft hackle feather, and go around maybe twice and come back up, and then sort of zigzag our thread right through that tip area, tie it off, and trim away the excess. And then we're just going to come in and hold those fibers back and secure them back down the body so they flow along. Again, this just adds a little bit of movement to the fly, and you can again take your dubbing brush and just brush this. That breaks apart those fibers so they're going to move and flow better. And you can just pinch along like that. Even moisten your fingers a little bit to start to train these fibers. Once they've got wet and dried in the fly box, they usually start to take that nice leech-like profile. The next thing we're going to add is a little bit of Mother Nature's flashaboo, if you will. This is peacock sword. And we're going to tie a topping and a beard of this. So I'm just going to look for a particular feather that has the individual fibers, like this one or even this one, are nice and long. So they're just going to flow over the top. So down near the base of the feather, and I'm going to use 3 on top and 3 below. And we just want to manipulate those 3 fibers so they curve and cup over the top of the fly. So we get those in place. See how those have trained and tucked right over. It's just a subtle bit of, again, as I said, Mother Nature's crystal flash. Remove another 3, so kind of stroke them all together so they get the grain of the fibers, if you will, the natural flow, all sort of in sync. And we're going to take these, I'm going to tie these on the underside. So I'm just going to twist the vise a little bit and try to push them on either side of the hook and push them back so they extend. The goal is, of course, is to try and get them to extend exactly the same length. But if it doesn't exactly work out, it's not the end of the world. So I'm just going to come up once, twice, 3 times, do a little check to make sure that they're all sort of going the same way. The lower part's always a little difficult because you've got the hook, but ideally you're trying to get them almost to veil, both of them, the tips meet up and sort of sheath the fly like this. It's all going to flow together when it's wet anyway, so it's just, we're always, I think as fly tiers, concerned that our flies will look messy in the box, or fly fishing buddies will all laugh at us. But now we're just going to finish the fly off with a little head of peacock curl. Just tie those in. I've got two strands of peacock curl. I've tied them in by the tips. And what we can do as well, and I probably should have done at the beginning, but at some point, just to help you identify your weighted flies, I'm going to take a red Sharpie and just come in and color that hook eye. And that way when I take a quick peek in my box, I know that those flies with red eye, obviously red eyes on them, are hook eyes on them, are weighted patterns. Although this one I tie in this configuration weighted all the time, so it's not really necessary. I sort of know. And all we're going to do is build up a little peacock curl head. And these have come apart, so I'm going to start winding again. We tied them in together, so they should behave as one. I'm just going to build that up, a nice sort of round ball shape, if you will. Come in. It's just subtle. It's a nice little finish to the fly. Come in and nip away the excess. Stroke everything back together. And then build up a neat little head. You can put some super glue, or a lot of times I like to use the clear fly finish and flow formula, same consistency as head cement or super glue, and just coat that onto the tying thread, and then use that to build up, and then whip finish. So we need to cure it, and your mohair leech is finished. So all that's left to do is give it a final preen, if you will. You can take your dubbing brush and sort of brush and get everything to flow together. But it's a traditional pattern, and this has been a great producer for me in the fall. Especially in smaller sizes. Sometimes I wonder if they even take it as a large chironomid larva or bloodworm. But whatever the reason, on a clear intermediate or a hover line, Rio's new In Touch series of lines, just great presentation tools for a pattern such as this. Cast and retrieve, let it sink, slow hand twist, 3 or 4 turn hand twist with pauses, or strip retrieve. Just play around with it until you find a tempo and a rhythm that the fish like. So there you have it, the finished Mohair Blood Leech. For more information on fly fishing, and Stillwater fly fishing in particular, please visit my website at flycraftangling.com. Here you will find fishing tips, fly patterns, articles, information regarding my seminars and schools, along with links to my blog and mine and Brian Chan's online Stillwater fly fishing shop. You can also visit our store directly at stillwaterflyfishingstore.com. In addition, you can also follow me through my social media channels, including Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for watching, and please take the time to watch my other tying videos as well.